Adrian, they are coming for us! They're coming for us.
The auction hammer came down with a sharp crack. Sold. The ownership transfer of Meridian Gallery is now complete. For a second, nobody moved. Then applause erupted across the room. I stood at the back, hand in my pockets, watching people celebrate the death of everything I'd spent 15 years building. My younger brother, Ethan, lifted a glass of champagne. To new beginnings. Laughter followed. The investors around him smiled. The board members smiled. Even some of my employees smiled. Nobody looked at me. Not anymore. A week ago, I had still been the founder. Today, I was just a man standing in the shadows of his own gallery. Ethan finally turned toward me. His smile widened. Adrian. The room quieted. Everyone loved public humiliation when it was dressed as business. You should say something. Several people exchanged glances. They wanted a scene. They wanted anger. Maybe tears. I gave them neither. What would you like me to say? I asked calmly. Ethan laughed. Maybe congratulate us. Us. Such a small word. Such a painful one. The investors beside him shifted proudly. They had followed Ethan's proposal 6 months earlier. Expansion. Luxury acquisitions. Celebrity partnerships. Massive loans. Everything I had opposed. Everything they had mocked me for opposing. Too conservative. Too old-fashioned. Too cautious. I remembered every meeting. Every argument. Every warning. Nobody listened. Now they own the gallery. Exactly what they wanted. Ethan raised his glass again. No hard feelings. The room watched me. Waiting. I met his gaze. No hard feelings. The answer disappointed them. A woman near the front frowned. She wanted drama. Instead, I simply picked up my coat. Ethan's smile faltered for half a second. Maybe because I looked relieved. Maybe because I wasn't fighting. That's it? He asked. Yes. You're just leaving? You won. The words landed harder than I intended. His expression tightened. Victory felt strange when the loser refused to beg. I walked toward the exit. Behind me, conversations resumed. Music returned. Champagne flowed. The celebration continued. Nobody noticed the elderly accountant sitting quietly near the wall. Nobody noticed him watching me leave. Nobody noticed him lowering his eyes. I did. And for the first time all evening, I felt something dangerous. Not anger. Certainty. Because Raymond knew. He knew exactly what I knew. And he looked terrified. Rain hammered against my windshield as I drove through downtown. The city lights blurred across the glass. My phone buzzed repeatedly. I ignored it. Another call. Ignored. Another. Ignored. Eventually a message appeared. Ethan, come back. We need to discuss transition details. I almost laughed. Transition details. For 10 years, I had sacrificed everything to keep Meridian alive. When our father died, creditors arrived within weeks. When the economy collapsed, I mortgaged my apartment. When artists threatened lawsuits, I negotiated settlements. When Ethan wanted funding for his failed startups, I provided it. Again, and again, and again. Nobody remembered those years. Success erased history. Failure rewrote it. Now I was the obstacle. The old man standing in the way of progress. Fine. Let progress have its chance. The phone buzzed again. This time it was Raymond. I answered. Silence greeted me. Then a shaky voice. Adrian. You stayed. I had to. I gripped the steering wheel. What happened? A long pause. I think they're moving faster than expected. My eyes narrowed. How fast? Tomorrow. Rain pounded harder. What exactly tomorrow? I shouldn't discuss this over the phone. That got my attention. Raymond never dramatized anything. Ever. Where are you? My office. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Come alone. The call ended. I drove faster. Meridian Gallery's accounting office occupied the oldest wing of the building. Most people avoided it. Too boring. Too quiet. Too far from the glamorous exhibition halls. Raymond had worked there for 32 years. Longer than almost anyone. When I entered, he immediately locked the door. That alone was enough to alarm me. He never locked doors. Stacks of files covered his desk. His face looked pale. Sit. I remained standing. What happened? He stared at me for several seconds, then opened a drawer. Inside sat a thick folder. Red cover. Confidential stamp. I recognized it instantly. Board authorization records. My stomach tightened. Why you have those? Because they disappeared. A cold feeling slid down my spine. Disappeared. They were removed from the archive. I stepped forward. By who? I don't know. A lie. Tiny, but obvious. Raymond looked away. Boo. His hands trembled. Adrian. Boo. The old accountant closed his eyes. Your brother authorized a series of transactions 3 months ago. The room suddenly felt smaller. What transactions? Loans. I frowned. We approved expansion financing. Not those loans. My heartbeat slowed. Whenever disaster approached, my mind became strangely calm. How much? Raymond swallowed. More than Meridian can survive. The silence stretched. Outside, thunder rolled across the city. I stared at him. Show me. He slid the folder forward. I opened it. Page after page. Signatures. Guarantees. Collateral agreements. Asset transfers. And hidden beneath them all, personal liability clauses. My chest tightened. Not because of the numbers. Because of the names. The guarantors. The beneficiaries. The shell companies. I knew them. Every single one. And suddenly I understood why Raymond looked terrified. Because this wasn't incompetence. It wasn't ambition. It wasn't reckless expansion. It was something far worse. Someone was stripping Meridian from the inside. And my brother had either helped them or become their victim. At the bottom of the final page sat a signature. Fresh. Recent. Authorized that very morning. My eyes narrowed. The celebration upstairs flashed through my mind. The champagne. The smiles. The urgency. The ownership transfer. Everything suddenly fit together. Raymond's voice dropped to a whisper. They needed you gone first. The clock on Raymond's wall ticked loudly. Neither of us spoke. I read the documents again and again. The numbers never changed. Debt hidden behind partnerships. Partnerships hidden behind acquisitions. Acquisitions hidden behind offshore entities. Beautifully constructed. Deliberately concealed. A trap disguised as growth. Finally, I looked up. Who benefits? Raymond laughed bitterly. Everyone who leaves before the collapse. The collapse. There it was. The word nobody dared say aloud. I closed the folder. When? Soon. That isn't an answer. It depends on cash flow. I leaned against the desk. How long? Maybe months. Worst case. Weeks. The room fell silent again. Most people would panic. Most founders would launch lawsuits. Call emergency meetings. Fight desperately for control. I did none of those things. Because something else bothered me. One specific detail. If this is real, I said quietly, why show me now? Raymond looked exhausted. Because you're no longer responsible. I stared at him. You could have shown me earlier. I tried. That answer surprised me. Tried. 3 separate reports disappeared. A chill crawled through my body. Disappeared? Yes. Who intercepted them? I don't know. This time I believed him. Fear sat openly on his face. Someone inside Meridian possessed far more influence than I had realized. Someone willing to erase evidence. Someone confident enough to do it repeatedly. I exhaled slowly. Then it's already too late. Raymond didn't argue. That told me everything. The next morning, news spread quickly. Meridian Gallery announced a massive international expansion. Financial media praised Ethan's leadership. Business websites called him visionary. Industry analysts celebrated the ownership transition. I watched everything from my apartment. The same apartment I had almost lost years earlier while saving the company. My television showed Ethan standing beside investors. Confident, charismatic, admired. A perfect success story. The phone rang. I answered. Watching? Ethan asked. Yes. Looks good, doesn't it? I walked toward the window. Rain clouds still covered the city. It does. A brief silence followed. He sounded disappointed. Maybe he expected bitterness. Maybe he wanted validation. Adrian. You could have stayed. There it was. The lie both of us understood. No, I said. I gave you opportunities. You gave me conditions. His voice hardened. Things change. Yes. Are you saying I betrayed you? I smiled faintly. Interesting. Guilty people often introduced accusations themselves. I didn't say that. Then what are you saying? I looked down at the crowded street below. Take care of Meridian. The line went quiet. That's all. That's all. I ended the call. 3 days later, people started arriving. Former employees, artists, collectors, suppliers. One by one. Some came for advice. Others came for gossip. Most came for reassurance. I offered none. Should we be worried? One supplier asked. I don't know. You built the company. Not anymore. But Ethan. Talk to Ethan. The conversations always ended the same way. Confusion. Frustration. Disappointment. For years I had solved everyone's problems. Now I simply stepped aside. The reaction fascinated me. People weren't angry because I left. They were angry because I stopped carrying them. A week later, the first crack appeared. A luxury acquisition failed unexpectedly. Then another. Then a shipping dispute delayed an exhibition. News outlets ignored it. Minor setbacks happened constantly. But I noticed, because I knew how fragile the system truly was. Then came a call. Late at night. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Almost. Hello. A woman's voice answered. Mr. Cole. Yes. This is Sophia Lynn. I recognized the name immediately. One of the largest private collectors in the country. Powerful. Careful. Respected. What can I do for you? A pause. Then, I think someone is using forged authentication records. My eyes narrowed. Regarding what? Several paintings recently purchased through Meridian. The room became very still. Sophia continued. I was told you would understand the implications. I sat slowly. Who told you that? Raymond. Of course. Can we meet? She asked. Yes. Tomorrow morning. Agreed. The call ended. I stared into the darkness. Forged records. Hidden loans. Missing reports. Ownership transfer. A pattern was emerging. And for the first time, I began to suspect the collapse wasn't merely financial. It was criminal. The next morning, I arrived early. Sophia waited alone in a private dining room. Elegant. Composed. Dangerously intelligent. The kind of person who noticed details others missed. She slid a file across the table. Look, I opened it. Certificates. Expert evaluations. Transaction histories. At first glance, everything appeared normal. Then I saw it. A microscopic inconsistency. Tiny. Almost invisible. But devastating. I looked up. Where did you get these? From Meridian. How many pieces? 7. I felt my stomach tighten. 7 was not an accident. 7 was a system. Sophia folded her hands. You already suspected something. Yes. Then tell me. I considered my answer carefully. Finally, I said, I think Meridian is standing on a cliff. She watched me silently. And everyone is celebrating the view. For the first time, Sophia smiled. Not because the situation was amusing, because she understood exactly what I meant. Outside the restaurant window, sunlight finally broke through the clouds. But somehow the city looked darker than before. And somewhere inside Meridian Gallery, people were still drinking champagne. They had no idea the ground beneath them was already beginning to crack. 3 days after my meeting with Sophia Lynn, Meridian announced another acquisition. The news dominated industry headlines. A prestigious European gallery. Exclusive contracts. International expansion. Millions in projected revenue. Investors celebrated. Employees posted congratulatory messages online. Ethan gave interviews. The market applauded. And yet by noon, Sophia was sitting across from me again. This time she looked angry. Not concerned. Not cautious. Angry. She dropped the tablet onto the table. Look. I glanced at the screen. A scanned certificate. Then another. And another. My jaw tightened. Every document contained subtle alterations. Different enough to be fraudulent. Careful enough to survive routine inspections. Sophia leaned forward. Whoever made these knew exactly what they were doing. I nodded. Yes. Can Ethan be involved? The question lingered between us. I wanted to say no. For years, I would have said no without hesitation. He was reckless, proud, ambitious, but never dishonest. At least that was the brother I remembered. The problem was that I no longer knew whether that brother still existed. I don't know, I said honestly. Sophia studied me. You still care about him. I looked away. Outside the cafe, pedestrians crossed the street beneath gray skies. I spent most of my life protecting him. That wasn't my question. No, it wasn't. I sighed. Yes. The admission felt heavier than expected. Sophia nodded slowly. As long as you still care, you'll hesitate. Not this time. Really. I met her gaze. I'm not protecting anyone anymore. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she pushed another folder toward me. What is this? Something you'll want to see. I opened it. My heartbeat slowed. Board communications. Internal emails. Private correspondence. Several names appeared repeatedly. People I recognized. Investors. Consultants. Legal advisors. And one name that appeared far too often. Victor Hale. I frowned. That's impossible. Sophia shook her head. Apparently not. Victor Hale. The man who had financed Meridian's largest expansion projects. The man Ethan trusted more than almost anyone. The man who publicly praised our gallery every chance he got. The man who had personally encouraged the ownership transition. A cold realization settled over me. Maybe Ethan wasn't leading this disaster. Maybe he was being led. That evening my phone rang. Ethan. I almost ignored it. Almost. Hello. His voice arrived immediately. You met Sophia. Not a question. A statement. News travels fast. People talk. I walked onto my apartment balcony. The city stretched beneath me. Thousands of lights. Thousands of lives. All right, I said. What do you want? A pause. Then, I need a favor. I laughed softly. The sound seemed to irritate him. What's funny? For years I gave you favors. Adrian. No. Silence. Then frustration. You haven't even heard it. Doesn't matter. His breathing sharpened. Things aren't as simple as you think. Then explain. Nothing. Several seconds passed. When he spoke again, his voice sounded tired. Older. Can we meet? That surprised me. Ethan hated difficult conversations. Always had. When? Tonight. I hesitated. Then nodded. Fine. We met at our father's old workshop. An abandoned restoration studio on the edge of the city. The place smelled of wood polish and dust. Memories lingered everywhere. Paint stains, broken frames, old sketches. Our father had spent decades there. Teaching, creating, building. I arrived first. Ethan entered 15 minutes later. The moment I saw him, something felt wrong. He looked exhausted, dark circles beneath his eyes. Shoulders tense, movements restless. Not the confident executive from television. Not the victorious owner from the celebration. A man under pressure. He closed the door. For several moments, neither of us spoke. Finally, he laughed bitterly. You know what's funny? No. Everyone thinks I'm winning. The words echoed through the workshop. I remained silent. Ethan walked toward one of our father's workbenches. His fingers brushed across the worn wood. Do you remember this place? Yes. Dad used to say something. I waited. He used to say success reveals character faster than failure. I remembered. So did Ethan. That realization hurt more than I expected, because it meant he hadn't forgotten. Not completely. What do you want? I asked quietly. His jaw tightened. Then he turned toward me. Victor wants another acquisition. My eyes narrowed. Why? He says expansion is the only way forward. And you believe him? Ethan laughed. A hollow sound. No. That answer surprised me. Then don't do it. His expression darkened. You think it's that simple, isn't it? No. The single word carried genuine fear. And suddenly I understood. Ethan wasn't controlling the machine anymore. The machine was controlling him. The workshop felt colder after that. Ethan paced slowly between old storage shelves. His hands trembled slightly. The sight unsettled me. This was the same man who had humiliated me in front of investors. The same man who had pushed me out. The same man who had claimed Meridian belonged to the future. Yet now he looked trapped. Weren't you telling me? I asked. He stopped moving. For a long time, he simply stared at the floor. Then he finally spoke. Do you remember the debt crisis 5 years ago? Yes. You fixed it. Barely. His smile carried no humor. Victor fixed the rest. Something clicked. A memory. A private funding agreement. Emergency capital. Confidential investors. I remembered rejecting the proposal. Ethan had pushed for it. Hard. Victor gave money. Yes. What did he take? The question landed like a hammer. Ethan looked away. That was answer enough. My chest tightened. What did he take? Influence. No. His silence confirmed my suspicion. Control. Ethan closed his eyes. Yes. The word barely escaped his mouth. I felt anger rise. Not explosive anger. The dangerous kind. The quiet kind. How much control? His expression answered before he spoke. Too much. Far too much. Board seats. Anything else? Yes. Contracts. Yes. Voting rights. Yes. I laughed once. A short, disbelieving sound. You sold pieces of Meridian. I saved it. No. The room seemed to shake beneath the weight of the truth. You postponed its death. Ethan flinched. The reaction told me I had hit the mark. For years, he had confused survival with success. Bandages with healing. Momentum with stability. Victor had exploited that weakness perfectly. Why tell me now? I asked. Because things are changing. Ow! Ethan swallowed. People are disappearing. I frowned. What? Employees. The answer caught me off guard. What kind of employees? Finance. Legal. Compliance. One after another. Every department capable of discovering irregularities. My pulse slowed. That was bad. Very bad. Where are they going? I don't know. You didn't ask? I did. His face hardened. No one answered. The workshop fell silent. Outside, wind rattled against the windows. I suddenly remembered Raymond's fear. The missing reports. The forged certificates. The hidden loans. None of it felt random anymore. It felt coordinated. Deliberate. Sophia had been right. This wasn't merely financial misconduct. Someone was cleaning house. Removing obstacles. Removing witnesses. Removing anyone capable of exposing the truth. Victor, I said quietly. Ethan nodded. I think so. You think? I can't prove it. Then prove it. His expression twisted. That's why I called. There it was. The real reason. Not guilt. Not reconciliation. Desperation. He needed help. The same help he had rejected for years. I should have enjoyed that realization. I didn't. Instead, I felt tired. Very tired. Adrian. His voice softened. I know I hurt you. I remained silent. I know what I did. Still silent. I know I pushed you out. The workshop seemed impossibly quiet. Then he said something I never expected. I was jealous. I blinked. What? A bitter smile crossed his face. Dad trusted you. The word struck harder than any accusation. He trusted both of us. No. Ethan shook his head. When things went wrong, he called you. That isn't true. It is. His voice cracked. The sound stunned me. I spent years trying to prove I could be better. For a moment, I saw not the executive, not the rival, not the man who stole my company. I saw my younger brother, the insecure boy who always felt second best, the boy I had spent years protecting, the boy who eventually grew into a man willing to destroy everything just to stop feeling small. And somehow that was even sadder. Ethan, I said quietly, you don't need to explain. Yes, I do. No. He stared at me, confused. I looked around the workshop, at our father's unfinished frames, at old photographs, at forgotten tools, at memories neither of us could escape. You already made your choices. His shoulders sagged. Then that's it. I considered the question carefully. Finally, I answered, yes. Not with anger, not with hatred, with acceptance. For the first time, I wasn't trying to save him. And I think he realized it, because something inside him broke. Not dramatically, not loudly, just enough. The way a crack forms inside glass before the entire structure gives way. He lowered his eyes. Neither of us spoke. Minutes passed. Then my phone vibrated. A message from Sophia. 3 words. It's starting now. My stomach tightened. Another message followed immediately. A photo. An emergency financial notice. Meridian's primary lender had frozen a major credit facility. Hundreds of millions. Gone. Just like that. I looked up. Ethan saw my expression. What happened? I turned the screen toward him. The color drained from his face. Outside, thunder rolled across the city. Inside the workshop, neither of us moved. Because we both understood the same thing. The first piece had finally fallen, and once a collapse begins, it rarely stops with a single crack. The drive to Meridian took 23 minutes. It felt like 3. Neither Ethan nor I spoke. Rain streaked across the windshield as city lights blurred into long silver lines. My phone kept vibrating. Messages, calls, alerts, news notifications. I ignored all of them. Beside me, Ethan stared straight ahead. His face had become unnaturally pale. The confidence that once filled every room around him was gone. Only anxiety remained. By the time we reached Meridian's headquarters, chaos had already begun. Employees crowded the lobby. Security personnel moved between groups. Managers whispered urgently. Phones rang nonstop. The atmosphere felt less like a business and more like a hospital receiving mass casualties. As soon as Ethan entered, people rushed toward him. "Mr. Cole, what do we tell the investors?" "The lenders want an emergency meeting. Legal needs, authorization. The media is asking questions." Questions. That word always sounded harmless, until enough questions appeared. Then companies died from them. Ethan tried answering several people at once. The effort failed immediately. Panic spread faster than information. I remained near the entrance, watching, listening, observing. For years I had stood at the center of every crisis. Tonight, I stood outside it. The difference felt strange and liberating. "Adrian," a familiar voice interrupted my thoughts. Raymond approached quickly. The old accountant looked exhausted. His tie hung loose. His eyes carried the look of a man who hadn't slept. "You came. What happened?" His expression darkened. "More than we expected." That wasn't reassuring. "How bad?" "Come see." The executive conference room occupied the top floor. I hadn't entered it since the ownership transfer. Walking inside now felt oddly foreign. Screens covered every wall. Financial reports, market updates, legal notices, internal communications. Red warnings appeared everywhere. Not one, not two, dozens. Ethan stared at the largest screen. "No." The word escaped him before he could stop it. I followed his gaze. My stomach tightened. 3 lenders. Not one. 3. All freezing access simultaneously. That wasn't coincidence. That was coordination. Someone had triggered this deliberately. Around the table, board members argued loudly. "The situation is temporary." "No, it isn't. We need emergency capital." "From who?" "Sell assets." "Which assets?" Every answer created 2 new problems. Every solution arrived too late. Then another executive rushed into the room. "There's more." Nobody liked hearing those words. "What now?" Ethan asked. The woman handed him a document. He read it, then read it again. His hands began shaking. "Ethan," one board member asked. No answer. "Ethan." Slowly, he passed the document across the table. I picked it up. A legal inquiry. Federal investigators. Art authentication fraud. Several acquisitions under review. Several. Not one. Several. Sophia's warning had become reality. The room exploded. "What is this?" "Fraud." "Impossible." "We followed procedures." "Did we?" Nobody answered that last question, because suddenly nobody seemed certain. And uncertainty is deadly when millions of dollars are involved. I stepped away from the arguments. Toward the windows. The city stretched endlessly beneath us. Beautiful. Indifferent. A company could collapse overnight. The skyline wouldn't care. Neither would the rain. Footsteps approached. Sophia. She stood beside me. Calm as always. "You look unsurprised." "Should I be?" "No." She folded her arms. "Victor left the country." That got my attention. "When?" 6 hours ago. I turned toward her. "Confirm." "Yes." "Interesting. Very interesting. People rarely run when they're innocent." "Any destination?" "Singapore." "Of course." "Sophia, study me carefully." "You're thinking." "I am." "What conclusion?" I watched lightning flash beyond the glass. Victor knew this was coming. Her eyes narrowed. "Agreed." "Which means today's collapse wasn't an accident." "Also agreed." "Which means someone pushed the first domino intentionally." Sophia nodded. "And?" I looked toward the boardroom. Toward Ethan. toward executives desperately searching for answers. Then Meridian was never the target. For the first time, Sophia looked genuinely surprised. What do you mean? Companies are tools. She waited. People are targets. The realization settled heavily between us. Someone hadn't merely wanted money. Someone wanted control. Control of collections. Control of transactions. Control of influence. Control of people. And once those people became liabilities, they were discarded. Just like Meridian. By midnight, the emergency board meeting had become a battlefield. Voices echoed through the conference room. Lawyers argued with executives. Executives argued with investors. Investors argued with everyone. Nobody listened. Fear had replaced logic. I sat quietly near the back, watching, exactly as I had watched for months. Exactly as I had promised myself I would. No interventions. No rescue missions. No last-minute sacrifices. Just observation. Consequences. A board member slammed his fist on the table. We need a statement immediately. About what? Another snapped. The investigation. We don't know anything yet. That won't stop the media. The room fell silent. Everyone understood that. By morning, every financial outlet in the country would be discussing Meridian. Speculation would spread. Confidence would vanish. Trust would evaporate. And without trust, institutions collapse remarkably fast. A lawyer entered hurriedly. His expression alone changed the atmosphere. What happened? Ethan demanded. The lawyer swallowed. Several investors are withdrawing. The room erupted again. How many? Enough. Nobody liked vague answers. But sometimes vague answers were worse than numbers. Because imagination fills the gaps. And imagination is merciless. At 2 a.m, Raymond approached me quietly. Come with me. We left the conference room together. Neither of us spoke until we reached the archive level. A section of Meridian rarely visited by anyone. Rows of secured cabinets stretched into darkness. Old records, contracts, historical acquisitions, the forgotten memory of the company. Raymond unlocked a door. Inside sat dozens of boxes. My eyes narrowed. What is this? His voice lowered. The reports. I stared. The missing ones? Yes. Every document that had supposedly vanished. Every warning. Every audit. Every concern. Preserved. Hidden. Waiting. I opened the nearest box. My pulse slowed immediately. Names. Dates. Transactions. Evidence. A mountain of evidence. Far larger than I expected. Why keep them? Raymond looked tired. Because someday someone would need the truth. I ran a hand across one file. The weight of it felt almost symbolic. Years of deception. Years of manipulation. Years of ignored warnings. And now the truth existed in physical form. Impossible to erase. Impossible to hide. Does Ethan know? No. Should he? Raymond hesitated, then shook his head. Not yet. That answer surprised me. Why? The old accountant looked toward the door. Toward the chaos above. Toward the company tearing itself apart. Because there's still someone inside helping Victor. The words landed heavily. I felt every muscle tighten. Are you certain? Yes. Ow! Raymond reached into another box, then handed me a folder. I opened it. My eyes narrowed instantly. Internal authorizations. Recent. Very recent. Approved after my departure. Approved after Victor's involvement became obvious. Approved by someone with extraordinary access. Someone still inside Meridian. Someone still active. Someone still dangerous. A single signature appeared repeatedly. I recognized it immediately. And for the first time that night, genuine shock hit me. No. Raymond nodded grimly. Yes. I stared at the page. Again and again, hoping I was mistaken. I wasn't. Because the signature belonged to Laura Pierce, Meridian's chief legal officer. One of the few people I had trusted completely. One of the few people who had openly supported me during the ownership transition. One of the few people who had warned Ethan repeatedly. Or so I thought. A cold feeling spread through my chest. Betrayal always hurt, even when you believed you were prepared for it. Especially then, because preparation never removes disappointment. It only makes it quieter. Raymond closed the folder. Now you understand. I did. Victor hadn't succeeded alone. He never could have. Someone inside Meridian had been opening doors for him the entire time. Someone intelligent, patient, trusted. And now, as the company collapsed around them, that person remained hidden. For the moment. But not for much longer. Because once panic starts stripping away masks, secrets rarely stay buried. And somewhere above us, Laura Pierce was still pretending to help save Meridian. Not knowing the evidence had finally surfaced. Not knowing the walls around her were beginning to close. Not knowing her carefully constructed position was already starting to crack. Just like everything else. By sunrise, Meridian Gallery was trending nationwide. Not because of art. Not because of exhibitions. Not because of success. Because of scandal. Every major business outlet carried some version of the same headline. Questions surround Meridian's financial practices. Collectors demand transparency. Federal inquiry expands. The language remained cautious. For now. But caution never lasted long once blood entered the water. I stood in the archive room, staring at Laura Pierce's signature. Raymond sat across from me. Neither of us had slept. The folder remained open between us. Proof. Not assumptions. Not suspicions. Proof. Years ago, that realization would have filled me with urgency. A need to act. A need to protect Meridian. Now I felt something different. Distance. Not because I didn't care. Because I finally understood that saving people from their own decisions often prevented them from learning anything. The door opened. Sophia entered. One look at my expression told her everything. You found something? Yes. Bad. I slid the folder toward her. She read silently. The longer she read, the colder her face became. Finally, she looked up. Laura. I nodded. She was feeding Victor internal information. Sophia closed the file. Not just information. What do you mean? She pointed to several authorizations. These approvals bypassed safeguards. I studied the documents again, and suddenly saw it. Layers. Laura hadn't merely cooperated. She had engineered pathways, created loopholes, removed obstacles. Victor may have designed the scheme, but Laura had built the road beneath it. A chill passed through me. What? Sophia leaned back. Money. Not enough. No. Power. Closer. She tapped the file. Recognition. The answer settled heavily. Recognition. The hunger that destroys people slowly. Quietly. Laura had spent years overshadowed by investors. Executives. Founders. Public figures. People like Ethan. People like me. Perhaps Victor had offered her something irresistible. A chance to become important. A chance to matter. A chance to stop standing behind others. And in chasing that dream, she had helped destroy everything around her. At 10 in the morning, the emergency board meeting resumed. Attendance was mandatory. Legal teams, financial advisors, major investors, department heads, everyone, including Laura. I entered quietly and sat near the back. The moment she saw me, something changed in her eyes. Not fear, not yet. Awareness. She knew I was there. She knew I was watching. And perhaps some instinct warned her that the balance had shifted. Ethan stood at the front. His suit looked wrinkled. His face looked older. One sleepless night had aged him years. Thank you for coming, he began. Nobody thanked him in return. Investors looked furious. Several board members looked ready to resign. The atmosphere had become toxic. A man near the center interrupted immediately. We need answers. Murmurs followed. Yes. Now. Not later. Ethan nodded slowly. I understand. No. Another investor snapped. You don't. Silence. Nobody defended him. Not even Laura. Interesting. Very interesting. The meeting continued. Questions. Accusations. Financial projections. Legal exposure. Each answer sounded weaker than the last. Then someone finally asked the question everyone feared. Who is responsible? The room froze. Because responsibility changes everything. Problems can be managed. Losses can be repaired. But once blame enters the room, alliances disappear. Ethan hesitated. A dangerous hesitation. I watched Laura carefully. She remained perfectly composed. Too composed. Like someone rehearsing calmness. The investor repeated himself. Who is responsible? Ethan opened his mouth. Closed it. then looked directly toward Laura. For the first time, I saw genuine fear flash across her face. Only for a second, but it was enough. Because innocent people react differently. They become offended, confused, angry. Laura became cautious. And caution often reveals more than panic. The silence stretched painfully. Every person in the room felt it. The investors, the lawyers, the executives, even the assistants taking notes. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Ethan finally exhaled, then said something nobody expected. I don't know. The admission hit harder than any accusation. Several investors stared in disbelief. You don't know? No. The honesty felt almost shocking. For years, Ethan had hidden uncertainty behind confidence. Now the mask was gone. A board member slammed a folder onto the table. Then find out. Another agreed immediately. Today, not next week, not next month. Today, the pressure intensified. Questions came faster. Voices rose higher. Control slipped further away. And through it all, Laura remained silent. Watching, calculating, looking for exits. I recognized the behavior because I had spent years around negotiators. The moment people stop defending themselves and start measuring escape routes, they've already accepted defeat. They simply haven't admitted it yet. The opportunity arrived shortly after noon. Federal investigators entered Meridian's headquarters. Not dozens, only 3, but they carried authority that filled entire buildings. The effect was immediate. Conversations stopped. Arguments died. Confidence vanished. One investigator addressed the room calmly. We require access to financial records. Nobody objected, because nobody could. Another investigator requested transaction histories, compliance reports, authentication documentation, approval records. Laura's expression finally changed. A tiny movement, a tiny tightening around the eyes. Tiny, but visible. Sophia noticed it too. I could tell, because she quietly folded her arms, waiting, watching, the same way I was. The same way predators watch a wounded animal realize it cannot run forever. 2 hours later, everything unraveled. Not dramatically, not all at once. One thread at a time. An investigator requested archived approvals. Raymond provided them. Another requested deleted correspondence. Recovered copies appeared. Another requested authorization chains. More records surfaced. Every answer produced another question. Every question exposed another inconsistency. Eventually, the room became silent. Not because the truth was unclear, because it was becoming impossible to deny. Then came the final document. The one Raymond had preserved. The one Laura believed was gone. The one carrying her signature. Repeatedly. Across years. Across transactions. Across approvals. Across concealed pathways. The investigator placed it on the table. Can you explain this? Laura didn't answer immediately. She examined the pages, one after another, perhaps hoping reality would change, perhaps hoping the evidence would disappear. It didn't. The room watched her, waiting. Finally, she spoke. Those approvals were procedural. Nobody believed her, not even herself. The investigator remained calm. Procedural approvals involving hidden entities? No answer. Procedural approvals involving altered reporting structures? Still nothing. Procedural approvals connected to Victor Hale? Silence. The kind of silence that destroys careers. The kind of silence that reveals guilt without requiring confession. Laura lowered her eyes, and in that moment, everyone understood. She had lost. The collapse happened astonishingly fast afterward. Investors withdrew support. Board members demanded resignations. Legal teams distanced themselves. Public statements changed tone. People who once praised Laura suddenly claimed they barely knew her. Human nature rarely surprises me anymore. Loyalty often disappears when consequences arrive. By evening, Laura Pierce formally resigned. By nightfall, federal investigators escorted her from the building. Nobody applauded. Nobody celebrated. Because victories built upon ruin never feel joyful. Only inevitable. I watched from the lobby. As she passed, Laura stopped. For several seconds, she simply looked at me. Years of history existed inside that silence. trust, respect, professional partnership. All gone. Finally she spoke. You knew. Yes. Her laugh sounded broken. That's why you left. I considered the question, then shook my head. No. Confusion crossed her face. Then why? I looked around Meridian's lobby. At employees. At executives. At shattered reputations. At consequences finally arriving. And answered honestly. Because nobody wanted the truth until it became expensive. For a moment, Laura simply stared. Then investigators guided her away. The doors closed behind her. And just like that, one chapter ended. But above us, Meridian continued collapsing. Because Laura had only been part of the disease. The deeper damage still remained. The debt, the fraud, the broken trust, and most of all, the choices people had made willingly. Choices that could no longer be hidden. Choices that were finally demanding payment. The week after Laura's resignation felt strangely quiet. Not peaceful, just quiet. Like the silence after a storm tears through a city. The destruction remains. The noise is gone. Meridian's headquarters no longer buzzed with confidence. Employees walked carefully. Conversations became whispers. Every meeting carried uncertainty. Every decision carried fear. For the first time in years, people stopped pretending consequences didn't exist. I spent most of those days away from the building. Not because anyone asked me to, because I no longer belonged there. That realization should have hurt. Instead, it felt like setting down a heavy weight after carrying it for too long. One afternoon, I found myself standing outside my father's old workshop. The same workshop where Ethan and I had spoken before everything started unraveling. The lock resisted briefly before opening. Dust floated through shafts of sunlight. The familiar scent of wood and varnish greeted me. For several minutes, I simply stood there, listening. The building felt frozen in time, as though my father might walk through the door at any moment, as though none of the years had passed, as though nothing had changed. But everything had. I slowly moved through the room, past unfinished frames, past old sketches, past workbenches scarred by decades of use. Then I stopped. A canvas leaned against the far wall. Covered. Forgotten. Curiosity tugged at me. I pulled away the cloth. My breath caught. It wasn't a painting. It was a blueprint. My father's handwriting covered every page. Detailed notes, concept sketches, architectural plans. At the top sat a title, The Community House of Art. I stared. Page after page described a public creative space. Open workshops, educational programs, affordable exhibitions, support for emerging artists. No luxury investors. No celebrity partnerships. No prestige games. Just art. Accessible to ordinary people. A dream. His dream. A dream he never lived long enough to build. Something shifted quietly inside me. For years, my entire life had revolved around protecting Meridian. Perhaps I had forgotten why I loved art in the first place. The sound of footsteps interrupted my thoughts. I turned. Sophia stood in the doorway. How long have you been there? Long enough. I smiled faintly. You always appear unexpectedly. It's a useful habit. She stepped inside. Her gaze moved across the workshop, then settled on the plans in my hands. What are those? I handed them over. She read silently. Several minutes passed. Finally, she looked up. These are remarkable. Yes. You never mentioned them. I didn't know they existed. Sophia studied the drawings again. Your father wanted this? Yes. Why didn't he build it? I looked around the workshop. Life. She nodded. No further explanation needed. Sometimes dreams die from tragedy. Sometimes from responsibility. Sometimes from time. The result is the same. Sophia closed the folder. What will you do with them? The question lingered. For the first time in months, I found myself thinking about the future. Not damage control. Not investigations. Not betrayal. The future. And surprisingly, the thought didn't frighten me. I don't know yet. Sophia smiled. You're lying. That made me laugh. A genuine laugh. The kind I hadn't heard from myself in years. Maybe she was right. Maybe I already knew. Later that evening, Ethan called. I considered ignoring it, then answered. Hello. His voice sounded tired, but different. Less defensive. Less sharp. Can we meet? I stared out the workshop window. What? Because I owe you a conversation. I remained silent. He continued. Not about Meridian. That surprised me. Then about what? A long pause followed. Us. We met the next day at a small cafe near the river. Not Meridian. Not the workshop. Neutral ground. The place was quiet. Almost empty. Ethan arrived early. Something he rarely did. The moment I saw him, I noticed another change. The arrogance was gone. Not hidden. Gone. Consequences had stripped away the performance. What remained was simply a man. Flawed. Tired. Human. He sat across from me. Neither of us spoke immediately. Finally, Ethan smiled weakly. I don't remember the last time we met without arguing. Neither do I. The honesty seemed to amuse him. For a moment, the tension eased. Then reality returned. Ethan looked down at his coffee. Meridian won't survive as it was. I wasn't surprised. No, parts of it might. Maybe. His shoulders slumped. I spent years trying to prove I was smarter than you. I remained quiet. Not because I disagreed. Because there was nothing left to say. He already knew. Ethan laughed bitterly. You know what the worst part is? What? I actually believed I was helping. The words carried genuine regret. Not excuses. Not manipulation. Regret. The distinction mattered. I know, I said. His eyes widened slightly. You do? Yes. Because that had always been the tragedy. Truly malicious people rarely struggle with guilt. Ethan struggled constantly. He simply confused ambition with wisdom. And by the time he realized the difference, the damage was done. We talked for nearly 2 hours. Not about business. Not about investigations. About family. Our father. Childhood memories. Mistakes. The years we lost. Nothing dramatic happened. No miraculous reconciliation. No emotional speeches. Just honesty. Perhaps that was enough. When we finally stood to leave, Ethan hesitated. Adrian. Yes. His expression grew serious. Thank you. For what? For not saving me. The answer stunned me. For several seconds, I couldn't speak. Then I understood. If I had intervened earlier, he would have learned nothing. If I had rescued him again, he would have remained the same man. Pain had taught what protection never could. I extended my hand. He shook it. Not as rivals. Not as business partners. As brothers. The relationship wasn't healed. But healing had begun. And sometimes that is all anyone can ask for. Over the following months, life changed gradually. The investigations continued. Victor Hale remained overseas. Authorities pursued him relentlessly. Several associates faced charges. More evidence surfaced. More truths emerged. The old system continued collapsing under its own weight. Exactly as it deserved. I didn't participate. I didn't interfere. I simply moved forward. With Sophia's help, I purchased an abandoned warehouse near the river. The building needed work. A lot of work. But every time I looked at my father's blueprints, I felt certain. This mattered. Not because it would make money. Because it would create something meaningful. Something honest. Construction began. Then renovations. Then partnerships with local artists. Months passed. Slowly, the dream took shape. Studios. Classrooms. Exhibition spaces. Community workshops. A home for creativity. A place where people could build instead of compete. A place where art belonged to everyone. One evening, as workers finished installing the final signs, Sophia stood beside me. The sunset reflected across the river. Golden light covered everything. It looks different from the drawings, she said. Yes. Better. I smiled. Dad would disagree. Probably. We both laughed. Then silence settled comfortably between us. Not awkward. Not empty. Comfortable. The kind earned through trust. The kind built slowly. The kind that survives storms. For the first time in many years, I wasn't thinking about what I had lost. I was thinking about what came next. And that felt like freedom. The grand opening arrived on a bright autumn morning. Hundreds of people gathered outside the renovated building near the river. Artists, teachers, students, families, retirees, children holding sketchbooks, people who would never have stepped inside Meridian Gallery. People my father would have welcomed without hesitation. Above the entrance hung a simple sign. Riverside House of Art. Nothing flashy. Nothing exclusive. No luxury branding. No celebrity endorsements. Just a name. And a purpose. I stood near the entrance watching visitors explore the building. The energy felt completely different from the opening nights I remembered at Meridian. There were no investors measuring profit, no executives chasing influence, no carefully rehearsed performances. People smiled because they wanted to be there. The realization hit harder than I expected. For years, I had mistaken prestige for success. My father hadn't. Maybe that was why he seemed wiser. Every year, I remembered him. Crowded. Sophia appeared beside me carrying 2 coffees. I accepted one. You sound surprised. I am. You helped organize half of this. Yes. And you're still surprised? She smiled. That's your problem. What problem? You expect disappointment. I considered that. Unfortunately, she wasn't entirely wrong. Years of protecting Meridian had trained me to anticipate disasters, crises, betrayals, losses. Even now, part of me remained alert for something to go wrong. Sophia gestured toward the entrance. Look, a group of teenagers stood around one of the exhibition spaces, laughing, debating, sharing ideas. One young artist nervously displayed his first public work. Visitors stopped to encourage him. Nobody cared about status. Nobody cared about influence. They cared about the art. And suddenly I realized something. This was what I had been protecting all along. Not Meridian, not the building, not the company, the people, the creativity, the opportunity. The rest had simply distracted me. Around noon, Raymond arrived. The old accountant looked healthier than he had in years. Retirement suited him. He slowly walked through the building, studying everything. Eventually, he stopped beside me. Your father will be proud. I smiled. You think so? I know so. We stood quietly for a moment. Then Raymond handed me an envelope. What is this? Something that belongs to you. I opened it carefully. Inside sat a photograph. Old, slightly faded. My father stood inside the workshop decades earlier. Young, smiling, covered in paint. Beside him stood 2 boys, Ethan and me. I stared at it for several seconds. A strange ache settled in my chest. Not painful, bittersweet. The kind of emotion that appears when gratitude and sadness exist together. Where did you find this? Archive storage. I laughed softly. Everything important ends up in storage eventually. Only if people forget it. His answer lingered. Because he was right. The most dangerous loss isn't destruction. It's forgetting. Forgetting lessons. Forgetting sacrifices. Forgetting what matters. I carefully returned the photograph to its envelope. This time, I wouldn't forget. Several weeks later, I received a message from Ethan. Not a call. Not an emergency. Just a message. Dinner tonight? Simple. Ordinary. The kind of invitation we hadn't shared in years. I accepted. The restaurant overlooked the river. Nothing expensive. Nothing impressive. Just good food and quiet conversation. Ethan arrived carrying a folder. The sight immediately made me suspicious. You brought paperwork. He laughed. Not business paperwork. That's reassuring. We ordered dinner. Talked casually. For a while, neither of us mentioned the folder. Then, eventually, he pushed it across the table. What is it? Open it. I did. Inside sat architectural plans, community outreach proposals, educational partnerships, volunteer funding. I looked up, confused. Ethan smiled. I've been working with some former Meridian employees. My eyebrows rose. Really? Yes. To do what? His answer came immediately. To help. I stared at him. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then I looked back at the documents. Most of the proposals involved expanding community programs, scholarships, youth exhibitions, art education, the kind of projects investors once called unprofitable, the kind of projects my father would have loved. You made these. Some of them. Why? Ethan leaned back. The answer arrived slowly. Because I spent years building things that impressed people. His gaze moved toward the river outside. And I never built anything that mattered. The honesty in his voice surprised me. Not because it existed. Because he finally allowed himself to say it. I closed the folder. Then let's build something that matters. For the first time in a very long while, Ethan looked genuinely at peace. Winter arrived quietly. Snow gathered along the riverbanks. The Riverside House of Art continued growing. New programs launched. More artists joined. More families visited. The building became part of the community, exactly as my father had imagined. One evening, long after closing hours, I remained alone inside the main exhibition hall. Soft lights illuminated the room. The river shimmered beyond the windows. The silence felt comforting. Not lonely. Comforting. I walked slowly through the space. Past paintings. Past sculptures. Past classrooms now empty for the night. Every corner carried evidence of life. Creation. Purpose. Hope. Eventually, I stopped beneath a framed photograph hanging near the entrance. My father. The workshop. The dream that had waited decades to become real. For several moments, I simply stood there, thinking, remembering, breathing. Then I smiled. Not because everything ended perfectly. It hadn't. Meridian was gone. Relationships carried scars. Mistakes couldn't be erased. Consequences remained. But life had moved forward. And so had I. For years I stayed silent while protecting people who never appreciated the sacrifice. In the end, I let them have the gallery they wanted. I let them keep the victories they demanded. I let them make every choice they insisted upon. And then everything collapsed. Not because I destroyed them, because they destroyed themselves. The difference mattered. Because revenge ends when someone suffers. But consequences continue teaching long after the fall. I turned off the final light and walked toward the exit. Outside, snow drifted softly across the river. Ahead of me waited tomorrow. Not a perfect future. A real one. And for the first time in many years, that was more than enough.